Good morning, y'all. Can you guys hear me? Someone give me a thumbs up or a nod. Cool. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for taking this morning to spend it together. Together is a really strange thing these days, and every moment that we get to do it is invaluable. You guys can't see in the digital world, but there are 14 beautiful people in this room right now. We decided to do like a little mini creative mornings in a space over here in Union Market called the 12 that I have the distinct pleasure of being a part of. If you haven't been here, get here. It's on Fifth Street, excuse me. And it's sort of this beautiful collaboration between 12 friends who do a lot of different things: photographers, artists, architects, designers, passionate plant mamas. And we've sort of created this space that is one part, I wouldn't say one part retail, but that's sort of the afterthought. It really is meant to be a living room for the Misfit Toys and all of the creative folk in the world. And I believe that's most people in this room. But yeah, I decided to ask some of my friends to come and sit and listen to me talk to a computer screen, because the idea of talking to a computer screen by myself sounded miserable. So they're here, and I appreciate all of them for being here. I appreciate all of you for being here. And we're just gonna go in. My name, like Raquel said, is Obiakwe Okolo. If you know me, I go by Obi affectionately, and my name means I'm Igbo. I'm Nigerian. My name means God's will has aligned with my will, and that's sort of the moniker that my parents gave me from birth. I want to tell you guys about the most freeing word that I've heard in my life to date. It's a single word. That word is miscellany. A miscellany is a group or collection of different items. It's the antonym of an anthology, which is a group or collection of similar or like items. This word came to me for the first time while I was listening to a piece. I think it was a Fresh Air. Terry Gross was interviewing Margaret Atwood about her late partner, Graham Gibson, and a book that they just written that was called The Bedside Book of Birds. And it's a miscellany about birds. Learning that word was such a sweet release for me, because for as long as I can remember, I could never understand a thing by staring at it or even at different instances of it. For me, knowing came from, and has always come from, sort of connecting a group or collection of different items and stumbling on the relationship to the thing that I'm trying to learn deeper. I've never been an obsessive sort of like singularly focused person. I've never known singular focus. I don't know that I remember my therapist asked me when I was like 26, when was the last time that your mind was silent? And I couldn't give her an answer because I did not know. That's sort of how my brain's always worked. So that's what today is going to be. It's going to be a miscellany on the topic of release, because every time I sat down to figure out what to say, when Raquel and the team asked me to speak, this was, I think, back in March, they asked, or something like that, March, April. And I was like, oh, sweet, release. That's perfect. We'll be coming out of the pandemic. It's like, so I sort of sat down and I was like, well, what the hell am I going to talk about? So I figured I would just talk about a little bit of everything. So just entertain me a little bit. Humor me. If it's terrible, just log off. I mean, whatever. People in the room can't leave, so unless they want to hurt me. So you guys can do whatever you want. Prologue. My relationship with my father has never been great. It's easy to blame him for everything I've ever done wrong, and easy to credit my mom for every win, but that isn't really fair to anyone in the story. For most of us as children, life happens to us. Patterns are formed, things are done to us and for us, but at a certain point, and it's different for everyone in this room, digitally and in person, we're released into this like subtle sort of agency and autonomy that no one prepares us for. Then we keep living, and suddenly the line between things happening to us and us happening to things just becomes this like wash. Then inevitably a moment comes where you have to face what is yours to forgive and where you owe it to others to beg for forgiveness. Last time I was on the stage, I was on the cliff's edge of a moment like this, fall of 2016. The whole story isn't mine to tell. It's long and painful, and it's definitely worth telling, but for the sake of time, I want to focus on one moment in that time when I was falling off of the cliff. It was 12 days into this process of my life being deconstructed based on my own actions. And I found myself in the guest room of a dear friend's house because they had opened their home to me when I just couldn't be alone. And I was trying to go to bed, and suddenly I just couldn't sleep. And it wasn't like a passive, oh, I just can't sleep, but I felt my body like actively refusing to let me rest. And that went from not being able to sleep to not being able to breathe fully. And then from that, it turned into a full-blown panic attack. I was hyperventilating. I started coughing uncontrollably and dry heaving. Suddenly I was throwing up. I called my mom and I told her I'm dying. I was like, this is it. I don't know what's happening to me. I cannot stop. And my mom, the only word she said was, I'm praying, just go. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. You suck. Didn't really help, but hung up the phone and kept crying and kept throwing up and kept dry heaving. And eventually, I don't remember when, my body just turned off. And I woke up that next morning. And when I say that every muscle and fiber of my body was sore to the touch, every muscle and fiber of my body was sore. And I felt like I had just wrestled with something far bigger than myself. And I woke up, went for a walk. This friend, this couple who I was staying with, every morning, it was one of those things where like they knew I was in a position where there was a lot of internal work going on. So they didn't talk to me. They just made sure that I was fed and that there was coffee there. So every morning I'd wake up and there was coffee made. So I woke up, grabbed a cup of coffee, went for a walk. And sort of in that walk, I realized that I was so eager to get out of this wilderness and to be released from the pain I brought on myself that I never stopped to entertain the idea that the wilderness itself was trying to gift me that freedom. Chapter 1, definitions, because words have meanings. I think it's worth noting that release in our limited English language has two use cases, the noun case and the verb case, or verb tense, which is oddly a false dichotomy because they're not different. Like you can't have one without you can't have the noun release without the verb release. But English is a frustrating language for some reason. I'm always a little bit annoyed with it because I feel like it's oddly limiting. And I think the reason why is because the building blocks of English essentially, especially in verbs and the verb world, they're essentially just watered down conjugations of other Romance languages. So there's this weird thing where it kind of leaves them annoyingly meaningless. And there's an irony that like the English language is the LaCroix of other languages. Because you just have this like essence of meaning, which isn't always a bad thing, but for every pamplemousse you get, you have to bear at least 3 or 5 limoncellos, and I'm not sure that it's worth it. And if you like limoncello LaCroix, you're a sociopath. I'm looking at you, Santi, because I know you like it. The root of the verb release, which is the dominant tense in English, is a verb tense. Is a Latin relaxare, R-E-L-A-X-A-R-E, which is broken down, made up of the word re, which means back, and laxare, which means to loosen. It means ultimately to grant relief or freedom from constraint, captivity, repression, or oppression. And this is important because it connotes a tension or a binding prior to the verb. In its noun case, release, which gets this distinct flavor from the Old French relais, means an abatement of stress, distress, or a means of deliverance. To the point of my sidebar about LaCroix, both of these words also share that French root relais, which is weird because like how can a root be two? I don't know. English is dumb. They share the root relais, which is also shared by another word, relish in English, which itself has a noun tense and a verb tense. So to relish something and a relish. And the meanings there are something that remains, that which is left behind. And the verb tense is to enjoy, to like the taste or flavor of. All that said, a release, noun, is caused by release or releasing, verb. And subsequently, every time we release, verb, we cause a release, noun. If we understand release through the lens of individualism, it's pretty innocuous. But like most things, when applied in community or in relationship, it gets kind of complicated and, if unacknowledged, quite violent. The law, I lost my spot. Here we go. Okay, got it. The law of conservation of energy, excuse me, states that the total energy of an isolated system remains constant always. So given the definitions of release, that means that my release from captivity or bondage or repression or oppression requires that somewhere in that system, the repression be redistributed. Example, the American South built its economy on slave labor. So to grant true relief or freedom to release a slave would result in an economic constraint that the system was not willing to redistribute. So the Black body to this day is not completely free because the system required a redistribution that we were not willing to give. Substitute Black in that sentence for any marginalized people group anywhere in any social situation, and it's still the same. Maybe I think in America, we've been having this conversation backwards the whole time. I'm not saying that freedom or release is a zero-sum game, because I don't think that it is. I think there's, my personal belief, there's a divine or universal understanding that can release that pressure, that tension, and redistribute it in a way that we don't have to bear it. But I do believe that we have been having the conversation wrong as Americans, because we constantly talk about sharing freedoms. We idealize a world where we can all relish, but perhaps the journey to the answer begins when the conversation changes from how can I share freedoms with you to how can I bear the burden with you? Because the system demands that energy is conserved always. Chapter 2, I told you we're going everywhere. Songs. Despite a deep love for design and a degree in architecture, music was my first creative love. If you know me, you've heard the story of the moment I realized that I wanted to, or I realized that despite stumbling into architecture, it was exactly where I needed to be. It was in Mark Blizzard's architecture and theory class called Architecture, Land, Culture, and Practice. And first day of class, I'm a freshman. I'd never been on a college campus, really, aside from visits in my life. Walk into class, and he steps on stage, hits the play button on something, and it's Miles Davis's Bitches Brew. And we listen to, he walks off stage, and we're just sitting there, and the album's playing, and it just keeps playing, and we're thinking, oh, he's going to come up at some point. Never comes up, keeps going. Album ends. He steps on stage and says, architecture is static music. The sooner you realize that, the better off you'll be. And I was like, don't know how I got here, but here is where I'm supposed to be. What he meant by that was that space, like music, is an exercise of retraction and contraction. And like music, space breathes. Music moves us because it reflects, in many ways, a uniquely sacred rhythm of constraint and release. It's kind of up to the prevailing culture and the artist's will to decide where in the cycle they want to drop us and where in the cycle, as a listener, ultimately they want to leave us. And the tools at their disposal are pretty vast, even though they're kind of rudimentary in a beautiful way. Rhythm is one tool. Syncopated rhythms are the equivalent of walking you up the stairs. Chord progressions and lyrical phrases that don't resolve are a melodic equivalent of stretching the rubber band. And the release is the tonic major or minor triad, or the word that completes the phrase, right? So if we look at the way that we've engaged with music and how music's been created throughout time, it often reflects the time that we're living in, even in the way that it pulls us in or stretches the rubber band and then releases us. So I've got a few examples here that I'm going to play for you guys. I'm going to share my screen, and it's going to be seamless and flawless.
Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away, steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here.
So with a lot of these songs, there's a longing, there's a wailing, there's almost a pleading, there's a prayer, there's a number of things you can call it, but it has no strong rhythmic pattern. It has no definitive beginning or end. You don't know in that case where Harry Belafonte is going next. You only know where he's come from. And I think there's a beauty to the way that that reflects the experience of the people who were singing it. Fast forward through, you know, the emancipation, through the Jim Crow South, and into a stronger civil rights movement, when the Pentecostal and gospel sort of music thing began to happen, borrowed from still different African tribal traditions and understandings. But suddenly, on the other side of captivity, the sound changes to this pure, unbridled release. And we're about to have a praise break up in here, y'all. So. So many feelings from that. It was Sunday morning, every morning, and just old women sweating all around me. What's so then you have this, again, another expression of what is ultimately release, which is a byproduct of tension, where it's just unbridled and uncontained joy. I don't know if anyone's in the room. I know people in the room, but I don't know if anyone in the virtual room has ever found themselves in a faith setting where something like this does happen, where sort of a shout breaks out, if you will. And from the outside looking in, it's just like, what the hell is wrong with these people? But then you take it all the way back and understand the lineage that took the people, those people, our people, from where they were to where they are. And that is the byproduct. It's an unbridled joy that can only be expressed by this just chaotic release of syncopation and sound and pattern and rhythm and ultimately dance. So then you fast forward a little bit more, and the Black experience in America, and again, any marginalized experience in any subculture, I can only speak for being a Black person. I'm not any other form of marginalized, really. The experience is not ever one or the other. There's always a tension. There still exists the wailing and the wanting and the longing, but also there's a knowledge and understanding of the freedom that's possible. And that then births us this other genre of music called rhythm and blues, which really literally in the name is just like release and constraint, right? It's right there. So we end up with things like this. This is my wedding song, by the way, our first dance.
I know your eyes in the morning sun. I feel you touch me in the pouring.
So here we've got PJ Morton. You guys can hear me, right? Everyone's just swaying their heads. I wish you guys could see.
I wanna feel my arms again.
Oh man.
And you come to me.
So here you got PJ sort of using all of those tools, the syncopation being ahead of the rhythm, the tense minor phrases that ultimately resolve right here, and it just sort of like melts away. So within Jack's face, within the confines of this like musical understanding, you begin to frame fullness or a fullness, an expression of the fullness of a Black experience. But then there's something to be said for artists who choose tension and know when we need to not be released, when they know that we're not ready to handle the release. And the song that comes to mind, there was one that came to mind written by Ben Folds called The Luckiest, which is one of my favorite songs. It's a love song. The entire song is unresolved phrases lyrically and musically. But I'm not going to play that for you because it's beautiful, and the train that we're on, I'm going to play this for you instead. Couldn't be more different.
blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South. The bulging eyes and the twisted mouth. Scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the tree to drop. Here is a strange and bitter crop.
Billy never lets up in that song. The entire song is tension. Da, 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 da. She never walks you back down. Like she never lets you come off the thing that she's trying to put you on. And I think that if you know anything about the song Strange Fruit, that was the whole point. She was ultimately writing about the lynching of Black bodies, and she was vilified for it. In every way as a tension building song, as a way to force society to grapple and grip with itself and not let up. It worked. And I find it fascinating. I recently watched The United States versus Billie Holiday and did a lot of reading about her life. If you haven't seen it, watch it. I think there's a case to be made for, again, understanding that maybe release is not the ultimate goal. Chapter 3, go outside. I really enjoy children's books. I feel like there's something about the way they can just distill complex ideas and just like, I feel like adults should read children's books because we kind of we suck a little bit sometimes because it's just like, it's that simple. So I took a stab at writing a children's book, a very short one, about the season that we were just all in. And it's called Go Outside. So here we go. This is draft 1. I finished it last night. I really did. Not so long ago, in a place, everything stopped happening. An invisible cloud came in the night and locked the people in their houses. The people in this place were used to their chaos, so the silence, it was maddening, but now their lives were limited to roommates, kids, pets, and spouses. It went on like this for quite some time, but from the very beginning, the only question on their minds was, when will this cloud pass so we can go back outside? The sun is shining, the tank is clean, and the bad things aren't happening to me, they said. The cloud isn't real. The story's a hoax. It'll pass in a few weeks. This has to be a joke, they said. It was hard to hear the punchline through all the coughing. The ones who weren't sick were all loudly scoffing. The left, right, and backwards, they all had different reasons, but at the core, the same goal, to be outside by next season. And so the winds changed and the cloud moved a little. The people ran outside just in time for the drizzle. While we all in this place obsessed with back to normal, the cloud grew familiar, less demure, less formal. I'm sorry, my sweet, this tale has no end yet. I do wonder how many of us will wind up getting wet. But the moral of the story, already clear as mourners' tears cried. If staying in so deeply haunts you, maybe it's not quite time to go outside. Chapter 4, an analogous analog analogy. This might be the only part of this story or conversation that has like clear practical applications. Everything else is just whatever. But have you guys ever noticed how violent photography is, like as an act? Maybe not at the scale that we are used to practicing it. Maybe not in our everyday engagement with it, but the origin of the art form is quite a volatile one. It's gunpowder, it's chemicals, it's fire, it's springs, it's gears. It wasn't quiet. It never was quiet. I was recently gifted a 4x5 large format camera by the widow of a deceased Smithsonian photographer who had this vast collection of gear. And to Raquel's point, we call photography shooting. I've always also been very curious as to when the language of photography and the language of firearms became the same. Trigger, shooting, all that. It's very fascinating. Anyways, but to set up this 4x5, you have to mount it on a tripod. And there's this whole process and rigmarole of things to do to prepare the shot to be taken. Forget preparing the shot and image itself if you're shooting in sort of a controlled portrait form. But the last part of the process is attaching the shutter release cable. And shutter release, as I'm setting up this camera, learning how to use it for the first time, I kind of realize, that I have to talk about releasing pretty soon. So I'm like, oh, I can make an analogy here. And in pressing the shutter release and watching what it does to the aperture, I realized the aperture is this really cool tension plate that bears the burden on what's happening behind it, or bears the burden of what's happening behind it and what's happening in front of it. As a photographer, all I can really control is what's happening behind the camera. Yes, I can set the scene. I can tell the subject to do a thing. I can, I can decide where I want to place the camera, but I'm really not fully in control of what is happening in front of the camera. And there's a tension that constantly exists between that thing, me, and the only thing keeping that tension at bay is the aperture. Once I hit the release, there's this remarkably destructive and again, violent thing that happens inside the camera and on the surface of the film. There's an infinite number of like tiny little explosions that burn the image onto this two-dimensional surface. And once that image is burnt, I can't undo it. It's there. It's I'm just like, it's magic. Like every time I develop a roll of film, it feels like something magical has happened. All of my work happens before I hit the release. And this is a situation where I'm assuming that I can even control the release. The only thing I control is my own input. And that's kind of what I love about film. It's honest. I remember the first time I underexposed a medium format roll of film, I scanned it, took it into Photoshop, Lightroom, sorry. And yeah, I was like, oh, I can just brighten this in Lightroom. False. I can't do that because what the beauty of the medium is I can't make something that's not there, no matter how much I slide the slider, because the work is already done. The release has happened. And if I didn't put in the work on the front end of that release, I'm not going to see the fruit on the back end of that release. And that's just a fact. I love film photography because it holds me accountable to the work I need to do. And I fear, so to talk about like what it ultimately is, like the violence of it. Sorry, I bumped my microphone. This is my first medium format camera. It's a Mamiya RB67. And I'd never shot film prior to, I had a 35 millimeter. I had never shot medium format prior to this guy. I bought it during the pandemic because I lost my mind like everyone else did. And I was like, I want a new expensive hobby. Turns out it changed my life. But the shutter on this thing, I don't know if you can hear it on the microphone. You hear that? So there's like that sound and then that. There's nothing quiet about it. There's nothing voyeuristic about it. Even 35 millimeter cameras, for the most part, unless you have Leica money, the shutter is not quiet either. And I think I've found that there's something, I've come to fear that the technology's prime function is to shield us from the violence and from the accountability of our actions, even as creatives. The function, the feel of dragging graphite across textured paper is loud. It's loud in a way that dragging an Apple Pencil across an iPad can never be. I can walk around the city and take pictures of this, of people of the city with this thing, but I can't not be seen doing that. I have to own the process. I have to own the engagement. I have to own the product. On the flip side, I can sit here all day and take pictures of everyone in this room on my phone, which I'm doing right now, and you just don't know. You don't know that I'm doing, like, I'm not accountable to you in community for this action, because the technology has shielded me from that accountability. And it's not just in creativity, it's not just in photography, it's in everything. If we look at social media and the role that it plays, unfortunately, in society, we get to just do things and say things, and we don't really bear the burden. We don't really bear the accountability for our actions. Even the worst twatted of tweets, to quote Raquel, the worst twatted of tweets, sure, you might get some digital backlash, but what at the end of the day does it actually cost anybody? Because on that same platform, you can find people who agree with everything that you've just said. So you're then forming a new pseudo false community that agree with you. To illustrate this, my dear, darling wife decided to go back into my Instagram and pull up some posts from the past of where I said things that are just shameful, not harmful, but certainly embarrassing. Do I even want to read these? See, I can escape accountability, although you guys can just go back and scroll through them yourself. But this one's a fun one. It's a picture of me. It's a picture of my, like, very hairless chin with a bow tie on. I never could see it. I don't know. I'm a photographer, guys. This is what I used to post. And the caption is "bow tie so fly!" exclamation point. Hashtag bow tie, because that was where I was at in life. That's who I was. Let's see. Where's another one? Oh God, I hate myself. Now we're gonna leave that one alone. Cool. Moving on. So again, there's this exactly, Farah. Nothing will humble you like your old photos. There is this thing that technology does where it doesn't require of us the accountability. It doesn't require of us the acknowledgement of the contribution that we are making. And I think that has grown more and more dangerous in our time. And I think as creatives, we have a responsibility to work against that. I'm not saying everyone needs to go ahead and go out and buy a medium format camera. I'm not saying that everyone needs to start, ditch their iPad and start drawing on sketchbooks alone. What I'm saying is we need to sit down for a minute and not allow ourselves to be released from the moment until we've done the work on the back end, until we've fully understood. There's this weird pressure to get things out, and out is not all that it's cut out to be. It really isn't. And I'm beginning to understand that as I've studied and learned about my practice and learned from people like Reggie Black, who's a great friend of mine and member of the 12, and others. I had this moment where I realized, like, I finished my first solo show here at the 12 in April. And I was like, all right, cool. What's next? And I'm like racking my brain. I'm like, what's the next idea? Ideas. And I pick up, I don't remember what, it was a book, like an anthology of conversations with photographers. And on average, these photographers are building bodies of work over 8 years. That is so counter to our current understanding of productivity and production. And there's just something deeply saddening and deeply concerning about that. Because again, I don't think that out is all that it's necessarily cut out to be if you're not doing the work on this side of the camera. There's so many other things. There's so many other directions I can take this, but we're running low on time. And I'm going to just hop into the epilogue. My relationship with my dad has never been great. It's easy to blame him for everything I've ever done wrong and credit my mom for every win, but that isn't fair to anyone in this story. For most of us as children, life happens to us. Patterns are formed, things are done to and for us, but at a certain point, and it's different for everyone, we're released into the subtle kind of agency and autonomy that no one prepares us for. Then we keep living, and suddenly the line between things happening to us and us happening to things turns awash. But then inevitably, the moment comes where you have to face what is yours to forgive and when you owe it to others to beg for forgiveness. Another moment came Thanksgiving of 2018. The whole story isn't mine, and it's long and painful, and it's definitely worth telling, but for the sake of time, I want to fast forward to a moment in that time when I was falling off a cliff. My family had just discovered that my father was not who he had made himself out to be for so many years. And we were sitting in my mom's room. It was myself, my dad, and a cousin of mine. And up until this point in this whole saga, I had been able to understand and have patience for my dad in a way that no one else in the situation could. Because the thing that he had done is a thing that I had done. It's a cliff that I had fallen off of. And in this conversation, tensions got high, frustrations came forward, and my dad raised his voice at my mom. It was the first time I've ever seen him do that. And I snapped. In that moment, everything in me wanted to kill him. Everything came up. I leapt from the bed. I lunged for his neck. I was screaming at him. Fortunately, my cousin's husband, who is a linebacker, literally and figuratively, heard what was going on, rushed upstairs, grabbed me, and just held me. Holding me wasn't enough because I was slipping away, so he pinned me against the wall. In my kicking and flailing, I kicked 2 holes in the wall. My elbows went through our drywall. I've never felt a rage like that in my entire life. And when it was all said and done, and the falling had finished, my whole family at this point, everyone who was there at Thanksgiving, was gathered in the room. My dad was in the middle. Everyone's asking what happened, why. And I walked in from my room, and the only thing I could do was fall at his feet and wept. And I apologized. Because everything that he had done aside, everything that he had set aside, my role as his son is first and foremost honor and respect. That doesn't come without accountability. But the thing that I had just done was not that. I apologized, and as I was apologizing, I'll never forget it, my eyes are closed, and I saw the little boy who had always, constantly, and only ever sought his approval. The little boy who had been hurt time and time again. I saw him walk away. I saw him say goodbye. The little kid who had been desperately trapped for so long, finally was released. And I say all that to say, as we are so eager to get out of the wilderness, to be released from the pain, let's not forget to consider that the wilderness itself is trying to gift us a type of freedom. Thank y'all.